EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says Brussels will continue to offer support to Kyiv as she meets with top officials in Ukraine's capital. EU Parliament votes in favour of a resolution which says Hungary is no longer a democracy, citing violations of the rule of law and Prime Minister Orban's ties with the Kremlin. Mourners join a queue reported to be 6.5 kilometres long to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth II, lying in state in Westminster Abbey.
Ursula von der Leyen, President of the EU Commission, is currently in Kyiv for her third visit to the capital to discuss Ukraine's integration into the EU single market. It comes at a critical time in the war, with President Volodymyr Zelensky returning from a visit to newly liberated Izium in the northeastern region of Kharkiv, 5 days after the country's forces recaptured the city. Well, counter-offensive gains have dealt a huge blow to Russian forces, who say that they're now regrouping. And with me now on set is our correspondent, Sasha Vakulina. Sasha, are we starting to get a clearer picture of what Russian forces have left in their wake in these newly liberated areas?
Yes, and the picture is not pretty, because what's been seen there, mind you, some of the areas of the Kharkiv region have been under the occupation with Russian forces for more than 6 months now. So, of course, if we were shocked seeing what happened in Bucha after 1 month of the occupation, there was like 6 times more time in the region of Kharkiv, and the infrastructure is widely really shut there. There was no electricity, no running water, there was no mobile network. Now, I have to say that the services, Ukrainian services, are now restoring those. There's already mobile coverage there. There's internet. The Ukrainian railways are already running. There were first trains now these days going to some of the towns that are newly liberated, and those trains were indeed full of people who are returning home, who want to go back home. But of course, at the same time, we have to understand that this is not over, in the sense that Russian forces are now specifically targeting the infrastructure sites. And this is something we have seen in the region of Kharkiv, when there was a total blackout a few days ago, right after they withdrew from there. And now, of course, in the city of Kryvyi Rih, where the infrastructure hit yesterday and then today again.
Well, some happy scenes, as you say, of people able to return. The question is, of course, you know, what are they returning to? And we'll continue to find out more in the weeks and months to come. Talking about brief moments then of celebration in this war, we also saw President Zelensky awarding medals to Ukrainian soldiers. I stress brief because, of course, the fighting continues.
The fighting continues, absolutely. And, you know, the liberation, the counteroffensive of Ukrainian forces was easy for those who did not participate in that counteroffensive, because, of course, Ukraine is losing the soldiers in these fights, in the counteroffensive, and as well the people. We still need to wait for the civilians to understand the scale of the tragedy that happened there, to understand Kharkiv region is huge, and the territories that were under Russian troops, under Russian forces, are huge. Well, one of these examples today, we have the news about Ukraine's State Border Guard Service rescuing 5 teenagers who were locked down in a basement by Russian forces and stayed there for 7 days locked. We're talking about people who had no access to water, no access to electricity, no access to any help whatsoever for more than 6 months. So, of course, Ukrainians are indeed rather cheerful about the counteroffensive, about getting their territories back, but there is no time for celebration or reason for that, because of the immense tragedy that they see that is happening there.
Fresh from her State of the Union speech, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is in Kyiv to reinforce the bloc's support for Ukraine and to talk about getting the two economies closer, while in her words, Ukraine progresses towards EU accession. Kyiv is keen to receive more weapons from the bloc. Its recent counter-offensive and the relics of Russia's war machine may bolster its chances too, showing that any military aid could be used effectively.
Ukrainian forces continue to consolidate their control of the newly liberated areas of Kharkiv region. The way in which Russian forces have withdrawn from here varied. Now, some units retreated in a relatively good order and under control, but others fled in apparent panic, which highlights likely localized breakdowns in command and in control. Now, most of these Russian forces who fled from Kharkiv went to Luhansk, where Russian occupation authorities shut off mobile internet in occupied Luhansk region, likely to preserve Russian operational security and better control the information environment. The Ukrainian counteroffensive in this region continues, and it continues to degrade Russian forces and threaten Russian artillery here. And now to central Ukraine, to the city of Kryvyi Rih, which is trying to contain damage to its water system on Inhulets River from Russian missile attack. It was targeted by 8 cruise missiles on Wednesday. Inhulets River, which runs south of Kryvyi Rih, is an important geographical feature for Ukrainian counteroffensive along the Kherson and Mykolaiv border. Now, Kryvyi Rih was again on Thursday targeted and hit by Russian missile attack. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Ministry said on Thursday that if the United States decide to supply Kyiv with longer-range missiles, it would cross a red line and become a party to the conflict.
The mass outpouring of public grief continues in the UK as huge crowds descend on London to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth II. Since Wednesday, people have been filing past the late monarch's coffin, lying in state in Westminster Hall. At one point, the queue was reported to be 6.5 kilometres long. It's a long, arduous wait, but mourners say it's worth it.
We started our journey along the River Thames this morning at 6:45, so it's been around 4 hours to get to this point, which is very good. We thought with the media coverage we would be at least sort of 20, 25 hours to get to this point.
It's anticipation and but solemn as well because of the scenario that it is, and it's, you know, it's quite sad. Yeah, we've expected it, but it's still sad.
The Queen's been my boss. I'm ex-military, so the Queen's been my boss for 22 years, and I'm looking forward to this moment. It's very important to me.
After hours of waiting, the procession ends with a few moments in solemn reverence as each visitor passes the flag-draped coffin. Buckingham Palace says 2 minutes of silence will be observed across the United Kingdom at the end of Elizabeth II's state funeral on Monday to give all members of the public a chance to pay their respects.
Hungary is the only EU country whose national recovery plan has not been approved. This is €5.9 billion of grants for a country struggling with inflation and high energy prices. But the money is being frozen by the European Commission due to concerns around corruption and violations of EU rule of law. Meanwhile, the European Parliament has voted overwhelmingly in favour of a resolution which says Hungary is no longer a democracy. According to Parliament rapporteur, the Ukrainian war has further undermined trust with Hungary across the EU.
Of course, the Ukraine war, that has an implication on the way that Hungary behaves in the Council with the other member states. That's the real problem that we have today, facing the sovereignty of the European Union, its security, and the relationship we have with Russia. We have a great concern that Hungary is undermining that because Hungary is more on the side of Putin and Russia maybe than the Ukrainian side.
MEPs of the Hungarian ruling party Fidesz reject this resolution, saying the government of Prime Minister Viktor Orban has already set up an independent body to advise the government against corruption. The plan will be presented through legislation in Hungary next week.
What we see is that while constructive negotiation is going on between the European Commission and the Hungarian government, stigmatization, incitement and problem-making are taking place here. They accept yet another dictation. Thank you very much. We do not ask for this dictation.
Meanwhile, the European Parliament is recommending all EU funds belonging to Hungary be blocked until the problems are rectified. The European Commission has a few days to make its decision about all of Hungary's money. It can either give the green light or continue to block all funds, but it may also provide a little more respite. Shona Murray, Euronews, Brussels.